So, guys, this is going to be a hard discussion. It's kind of been all over the place, but I think we have a couple options for you to consider tonight or for later on.
Yeah.
But with that, Scott, I'm going to let you kind of kick it off since you've been elbow deep in this.
So the intent here is to bring everybody up to speed as much as possible in an hour or so. I mean, we've been looking at it for a while, and it's just hard to understand. So hopefully we've netted it down to where it's manageable. If you don't understand something, ask, and between the three of us, we'll try to give you an opinion. And Jeff and Glenn, between the five of us, we ought to be able to come up with a consensus on the right answer. But really, it's it's about the budget relative to the electric utility, some decisions we need to make in the council session with further discussion. But this is just so that you're up to speed when we have those discussions, and then you generate some new questions or more questions. If we had to go through this in a session, council session, it wouldn't be effective use of everybody's time. This is live stream, so if somebody's interested, they could jump on tonight as well. So really just want to cover three things. What's the current budget condition for this utility? What happened? How did we get here? Then the important rate discussion. What needs to happen? And that's where, as a council, we have the ability to do multiple things. Rip the Band-Aid off and fix it, spread it out. All those things are really what we as a group need to decide in a council meeting. Then we'll talk about the rate setting process that we've talked about in committee. Just share it as kind of what Jeff and I've been talking about, what makes sense, along with Ben and Glenn, what makes sense every year, like we did in water, where the MCI inflation index is going to be used. We need to look at hard for this utility as well. And then, because of the volatility of this utility, it's so large, expenses, it just warrants looking at the rates every year. So you go through the budget process, what the utility is forecast for the budget for the year, right? So they've figured out, estimated the power cost, estimated, all our operational costs. The debt's pretty cut and dried, so they kind of know, here's what we think the expenses are going to be in 2024. We're talking about 2025 now. We'll finalize that in August. And then as we get closer to the end of the year, we ought to be able to go look at that budget. Is it still valid? If it is, let's go make sure the rate is set that make sure we can cover that budget. Or we got to go, if we don't want to do that, we got to go back and pull things out of the budget. So do it before the year starts as opposed to first quarter or mid-year where we're trying to react to something. So if we do that every year, we should be in a good shape from a budget perspective. From keeping reserve in policy, all that should happen if we pay more attention to it at the right time. So that's what that process is about. We'll talk about it. And then just the decision timeline of what we need to do here as far as rates are concerned. So let's see here if I do that. I can kind of point to stuff if I put it in slideshow.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Okay. So where we're at right now, just a snapshot of, it's pretty simple, just like you do at home. What do you expect to spend in your household for the year, and what do you expect to earn in your household for the year? So what we looked at is the 2024 expense budget that we approved last year, and then what our projected rate revenue is to cover that. And what jumps out at you immediately is not enough revenue to cover what our projected expenses are. That's a problem, right? That just doesn't work. I think we've mentioned it many, many times that we have not changed the rate per kilowatt hour rate in this utility for 15 years. Okay, we can kind of talk about how that happened and what that did. But we're at the point now that probably should have changed it before now. because if we don't do anything, we're going to end up with a negative cash flow of about $1 million. Now you say, well, that doesn't work. Well, it could work if we have enough reserve to cover it. We'll talk about that. We do have reserve to cover a lot of it. But that doesn't solve the problem next year because that reserve's gone, and now you're starting out, assuming your budget's the same and your revenue is the same, you're projecting another $1 million loss for next year. Questions? You guys tracking with that right now? So that's from a very high level, is kind of where we're at. What we broke it down into were, on the revenue side, it's the rate revenue. That includes, so it's rate revenue per kilowatt hour charge. The meter fee is revenue, and the sales tax is revenue. Then there's some ancillary stuff like meter installation fees, and there's about $250,000 worth of other fees that you really can't count on, but typically show up every year. And this is projected out. We just use the same kilowatt hours delivered this year as last year, kind of a conservative estimate. We use the rate at $11.54, which has been that way for 54 years. Meter fee stayed the same at $12. The sales tax is the same. So what we broke out here on the expense side is the wholesale purchase power. Those are all the contracts we talked about.
Can I stop for a minute?
Yeah.
Do we charge a fee for the meter being set?
Installation? Yeah, I believe so. That's what the installation fee is, isn't it? When you hang a meter?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that falls in that meter fee?
No, that falls in the other. Meter fee is the
Oh, it falls in other?
monthly, yeah, it's other. Meter fee is a $12 monthly charge that everybody that has a meter gets. That charge, $12 a month.
Do you find that is what it should be, or should it be higher than that?
We can certainly talk about that, yeah. I mean, something needs to be higher to make that revenue line match that expense line. So you can either reduce expenses if you can, we should be looking at that as well, and growing your revenues so they match.
That's $32,200. That's for the year,
That's the $12 a month annual.
per year,
Yeah, that's what we make a year.
per person, per meter.
And then that's for all of our
I'm sorry,
meters.
per meter.
Yeah. That's for all of our meters for 1 year.
I kind of wonder if that's not too low.
So on the expense side, so the purchase power is what we buy power from. You've heard of the 5 purchase power agreements that we have. So we kind of know what they set the charge at for us in our 20-year contract or whatever it is. However, they have the ability to change that on a daily, monthly basis. Monthly basis. If their fuel costs go above what they calculated to give us our rate, they charge us a PCA. So what we paid is not what is in the contract, it's more. So that's how they cover themselves, and they don't lose money by misforecasting their fuel costs, etc. We do the same thing. We'll talk about that. So we have a power cost adjustment as well. So how it should work is whatever we forecast for the year that we expect to, for that number of kilowatt hours pay based on our contracts, that's what we budget for. If it comes in higher, our PCA should move our cost up past that. If you look on your bill, you got that fuel adjustment line. You would pass that along to the citizens, and we would never lose money on power. We're just passing it through, okay? So it kind of takes care of itself. We don't have to worry about, are we over budgeted, under budgeted. It's going to end up where whatever we paid for the year is what we charge for the year.
Consistent, it's just consistent.
Yeah.
Constant, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So we tweaked the PCA for them, we fixed it, so we're comfortable that it's going to cover us for the purchase power. The part that doesn't change is our expense budget. So we've got generation, we got distribution, we got administration. We kind of lump those all into operations, but that's what we go through the budget process for. That's what we end up approving that budget for those 3 kind of sub-entities. But if our costs go up there's no way really to catch that. That's where that's where the reserve fund helps us buffer some of that. If you have a reserve fund and your costs were more than you expected, you pull it out of your reserve fund. You don't have to raise rates in the middle of the year. So we're talking about three things: purchase power, operations, which are those three middle ones, and then just debt, principal, and interest. And that's very definable. We know what that is, just like you do on your home loan, your car loans. You know what that is for the next 10 years. So those are the costs that we track, and you kind of see what those are. Any questions about 2024, what it looks like today?
The distribution, is that,
Distribution is
explain what you classify as
so
distribution.
generation's the power plant, distribution's the substation, all lines, right? Actually, the transmission to get it to the homes.
Total city.
Administration is is everybody that's working in the utility.
Okay, the distribution system is a very important system because that carries everything.
Well, they're all important. But yeah, if that goes down, you don't get electricity.
Could that go a little higher?
What's that?
Could that go a little higher?
Well, that's an expense.
That's the expense line. These are all expenses.
That's all covered in your 6 million?
6 million is all our expenses. You'd like to make that as little as possible, and you want to make your revenue match it. Okay. So, kind of how the rate is structured, or what we're proposing to do every year, is to look at it. You saw that expense. The 5 bars are really 3. There's purchase power. There is generation, distribution, administration, which is operations cost, right? So purchase power, administration, and your debt. Okay. And then if you had to eat into your reserve last year, you probably need to add some into your rate to be able to fill that reserve back up. So there might be a time where you need to put in a half a cent a kilowatt hour to get that reserve back up to where your policy is for the end of the year. So looking at this year, if we did that expense bar stack chart and broke it out into what we should be charging, you can see that it's a net rate of 16.8 at almost 17 cents. And what that net rate is it's at 11 cents plus the any PCA that we charge plus any plus the meter fee, all that's in there. So that's added to the 11.54. So if you take everything we charged in 2023 divided by the kilowatt hours, we charged out a net of about 14 cents, a little over 14 cents per kilowatt hour. If we do that same analysis for what we need in 2024, it's a little under 17 cents. So you can see that's where that negative cash flow is growing. You're not charging enough to meet your expenses. And you can see what each, if we were just charging power, it'd be, a little over 7 cents. Operations, a little over 8 cents. And then the debt's $1.50 cents. And you total that up and that gets your 17 cents. So this is a structure that we propose to use every year as we look at our budget, which we finalized, and say, okay, what are we going to need per kilowatt hour to cover that? And that builds your rate. And then we'll also build in that municipality cost index that measures inflation for municipality, things that municipalities buy. And that will also be something that we would look every year to just increase because our costs going up. So if you do it this way and you have a budget, you should be within where your reserve fund should cover any overages that you missed in your expense budget or something comes up.
So you have no idea what the reserve catch-up would be?
So that's part of what we need to discuss going forward. We'll show you what the options are. It depends on how fast you want to how much you need to catch up and how quickly do you want to do it. Right? Do you want to do it between now and the end of the year? Do you want to do it through next year? You want to do it the following year? So that would change that number. Right? So we don't know. That's a council decision going forward. Any questions on that? Okay, this is just some data. Lot of data here, but just to, we'll make sure you all have this so you can look at it and study it and ask questions. It was kind of fresh. We got updates this morning, so it's real time. So this just looks at those different entities, power, operations, and debt from 2014 up to 2025. And you kind of just look at the numbers and see what they did, or just look at the chart and see which ones grew, which ones shrank. And then the pink line is the municipal cost index. And that's the inflation.
You put that together?
No, Ben did that. So you can see that 2021, I mean, our costs don't necessarily follow that directly, trying to figure out why that is. I think Ben was a little surprised as well.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah. I mean, it does a little bit, and maybe we've got delayed costs, but
Why did it drop in 2015?
2015, that's just the index of, that's an organization that measures all of, just like the CPI. Some organization measures a fixed number of things that municipalities usually buy, and they compare it year over year, and they set that and say, well, costs went down that year for these set products. So that's your inflation index is what that is for municipalities, okay? So I mean, that one's interesting, but I'm not sure what to necessarily draw out of that. It's, like I said, it's pretty new. So
What's the high on 21? How did they get it back down so quick?
I don't know. I mean, it's not, nobody controls that. It's just the price of things that municipalities buy. A big list of things. So, so breaking out the three factors into five factors, we've got your operations broken out now into generation, wholesale purchase power, and distribution, and administration. And you can just see, and this is kind of a relative scale. So the line on the top is the wholesale purchase power, and then the other parts, actually the operations piece, are the four below that. Actually, the three below that plus debt. So you can see that the biggest chunk of our rate, about half, if you remember from the last slide, is what it costs us to buy the power. The rest of it is our operations cost and our debt cost, which is the orange line. So I think one thing Ben would point out if he were here, and he pointed it out to us, is if you kind of look at this over the years, our operations costs have remained relatively flat, and the power costs, as you heard from KMEA, are just going up and to the right. And each one of those lines has its own piece of our rate, right? If you remember how we're setting the rate. So each one of those lines, so as that power goes up, our rate will follow it.
Wholesale purchase price went
That's
a bit from 2019 up to 2022.
Yeah, and so to me, this one kind of tells the story about how we got here without raising our rate for the past, 15 years. And what you see here is that same stacked bar chart with debt on the bottom, operations in the orange in the middle, and wholesale purchase power in the blue on the top. And that pink line across there, and those are all relative to dollars per kilowatt hour, or in this case, cents per kilowatt hour. So everything's relative, and you can see where our rate has done, and this is from 2014 to now, it's just been stuck at 1154. And you can see what our total revenue's done, is the green line. But you can see what our cost did here, this year. You can see, so I think what's important is this line here. So our total revenue line is green. You can see, well, we're barely, if that's your total revenue, that's your expense, you're barely making it, right? So what we added was, well, that doesn't include the reserve. So if we had reserve in the fund, then this is the total revenue plus the reserve. So you can see if you have enough reserve, you can go, your expenses can go above your revenue, and you pull it out of reserve, and you're fine. If it's high enough, you don't even need to replenish it. You just start eating into your reserve. I think that's what we've been doing for the past several years is eating into that reserve, and we ran out about 23. As you can see, 22, 23, that reserve total, revenue reserve, the black line is getting extremely close to our total expenses. And then we go upside down in 24. So, should have raised rates probably, certainly at the beginning of this year, and we probably would have been okay. In KMEA, you remember the presentation, they gave us 3 options, and option 1 and 2 had raising rates in 2024 and then 25, 26. Option 3 was don't raise rates in 24, just change your PCA formula and raise your rates in 25 and 26. Well, that's what we chose to do, and we got to looking, what they recommended was, it really wasn't a PCA change, it was actually putting some of the rate into the PCA. It was more than just power adjustment. It was, you're this short in rate, put it in the PCA. So, talking to Jeff, it's like, that's not what the PCA is for. It would make you whole. You would be charging the citizens the same amount as if you just raised the rate to what it needed to be. Because if you just be paying that second line, that fuel adjustment would be way bigger than it should be. So we chose option 3, but we didn't really understand. We thought fixing the PCA formula would fix it, and we found out it didn't. So that's kind of why we're here today saying, well, you know what? We do need to change the rate, and the sooner the better, because things are going up and to the right, and the longer we delay, the bigger the gap we're going to get.
Did everybody agree on the same thing?
Everybody agree on, who's everybody?
All of you that was in the committee.
Yes. I think we all see.
Agreed on 3?
3 what?
You said it was 1, 2, and 3.
We spoke about that.
No, the council, that was a council meeting, and we all, I think the recommendation was made to do option 3. Whether we came back out of the budget and finance, I don't remember. But yeah, it was just a lack of understanding of what they meant by changing the PCA formula.
So the committee agreed with number 3 then?
Yes. So if you want to blame somebody,
I'm not going to.
blame me. Any questions about this? I mean, it's really fundamentally straightforward. It's our rates haven't changed. We've been getting away with it by having a healthy reserve fund. So if you think about it, we've been using that money to avoid changing the rates. Up until now, we have no choice. Comments you guys want to add to this?
No, I think you hit it. Hit it pretty good. If there's anything to add.
I will say this.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time
Yeah, everybody put in a lot of time.
there.
Yeah.
But you kind of led it.
It's definitely a committee effort. And this one's just kind of for your information. This, Ben put this together of looking at those 3 elements: debt, operations, and wholesale purchase power, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. What he sees as where this is going, he kind of sees, looks like it's moving in the right direction. I think we need to dig into this deeper and see, exactly where he got this and how he's showing power dropping and those sorts of things. So one thing is for sure, you see the debt drop off at the bottom in 27. So there's 10 cents. I'm sorry, there's 1 cent per kilowatt hour that drops off from 26 to 27. So this is kind of an FYI. Okay, so this is really the decision, not making decisions tonight, but this is the decision the council needs to make before the second meeting in July. If the council decides that we need to raise rates mid-year or not. So this one is showing a 10% increase in the rate. So the 1154, I don't know what that calculates to, would be at 10% above that. Would be changed retroactive to July 1st, and that would be that way going forward until we changed it. If you look at 2024, here, this column, that's the 10% increase. You see, we actually end the year with a 1.4 million in the reserve fund, and our policy right now is 15 to 25%, which is like 900,000 to about that. It would be 25. That would be right at 25%. So that would keep us at the highest end of our policy if we went to this 10% increase July 1 and things mapped out the rest of the year like we believe they will from a usage perspective.
But eventually it's gonna wind up at 17%.
Right. Yeah. You're reading ahead. Good for you. So to your point, what this also proposes is if you do that, then you still are not making up that $1 million completely. You kind of need to get to that 17 cents this year. This will get us partway there. Proposal then would be 5% increase starting January 1st of 2025. And then just the estimate for 2026 would be another 2%. Now, I don't believe this includes any of the municipality cost index. So if the municipality cost index, so we got to get clarification on that. I don't think it's that. Instead of this, it might be additive to this.
I think it's included.
Yeah, I think it's this.
So if the MCI was 2.5, we would only have to raise it 2.5. We'd raise it 5, but it'd be that 2.5 and an incremental 2.5 that we needed.
Right.
Okay. So we'll confirm that. But, so that would be the total increase. That would include the cost or the inflation.
Not completely understanding what you say.
Okay.
Wouldn't it be more practical, maybe, to take the 17% now?
That is an option, yes. And when you say practical, what do you mean by practical?
Well, practical, logical, maybe whatever. Practical, logical.
So
It seems, I'm using the wrong terms.
No.
It don't make any difference. I'm thinking 17%.
Yeah.
At the first shot. But
yeah,
those
you're saying
gives-
get to where you should have been to start with.
Yes.
Immediately.
Immediately. And that gives the people an opportunity to actually recover in the next 2 years. To a degree.
No, because that 17 cents sticks there for it. That's where you start and that's where you stay.
It's gonna stay.
Right.
Well, depending, if your PCA goes up,
Yeah,
Go higher.
that's completely independent PC. So
Well,
Jerry,
yeah.
that is one option, absolutely, on the table. And that's a personal preference. And when we talk about why we wouldn't do that, I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah. So basically, we're looking at going from 14 cents a kilowatt hour to 17 cents a kilowatt hour, and discussing with Amra and kind of getting a feel for what sort of the impact is at the customer level, at the citizen level. About 800 to 900 kilowatts per month is what folks use, the average household use. And we kind of took it from the perspective of the average household. Commercial obviously impacted, schools obviously impacted, but thinking about those folks who are going to be, on fixed incomes and what that jump's going to be monthly for them. And I think it was at the 3% increase if you just did it right out the gate. You just did the 3 cent increase per kilowatt hour right out the gate from 14 to 17 at 2,000 kilowatt hour usage in the summer peak months, so July and August, which is when we're making the change. So we have to be a little even extra more careful. It could be upwards. You do the math. So 2,000 kilowatt hours, times 0.03. I mean, you're looking at $60 a month increase in people's utility bills in the first 2 months here. I mean, that's massively impactful. I don't know that I feel comfortable putting that out there for the month
in
to
the
month.
first 2 months.
That's just for 1 month.
That's estimating.
That's a 2,000 kilowatt hour usage.
What
yeah.
happens in the 4th and 5th month?
Well, your kilowatt usage is going to go down
It
because
goes
it's the
down,
summer,
right.
yeah. But September's not a cakewalk either.
Continue on.
Well, that's it. So, I mean, the question is, if you want to look at it from an impact perspective, and when you want to, when we talked about having, it broke down into thirds. So we have 1,800 households, rooftops, just residential users. if you took the top 600, the middle 600, and the lower 600, you can assume, I think, we have about 250 people who spread out their bills.
Yeah.
And-
Even pay.
Yeah, and so kind of think about maybe the folks that are doing that are maybe the ones that this would maybe impact the most. There's a reason they're spreading those bills out. They don't want those big hits. They're trying to avoid, by spreading them out, they're trying to avoid the big jumps in the summer months. So there's a reason for that. And throwing an extra $60 a month right out the gate for July, August, and I mean, call a little bit September too, maybe an extra 40. I personally would have an issue doing that and wouldn't feel comfortable ripping the Band-Aid and putting that added expense on our users who are going.
I mean, I completely agree. I think our impact to the citizens have to be as minimal as possible. In our businesses. I mean, our businesses
Sure.
hurt
Yeah.
during, especially
Oh, yeah.
August when utilities are going outrageous. So
Yep.
I'm more of a
Taking,
spread it out, less impactful as long as we possibly can.
take into consideration that manufacturing companies are now making it so the use of equipment in our house, like air conditioning, furnaces, microwaves, light bulbs, and all that stuff is using less electricity than it was 10 years ago.
You saw the up and down with Ben, in his forecasting. I wonder how much of that's in there. As far as, you see your,
Did he say?
no, I don't know why that did that.
We need to get some.
I assume a lot of it has to do with some of our contracts. I know that GRDA comes off in 26, 27?
26.
26. So, and I'm not sure if he's kind of seeing the horizon there, and maybe we can get a better deal on that. We have, obviously some discussions on that, but I'm not sure. I'm guessing he's not pulling that out of thin air. I'm sure there's some kind of an index that kind of gives at least a 2 or 3 year forecast on maybe how things are going.
I get where you're going, Jerry, on usage, but I don't think our usage has ever went down.
It's not
I
dropping.
don't,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're adding more
Keep track
people.
of it.
Everybody could
Yeah.
averagely be using less.
you got more
But as you add more business,
The
more people,
schoolhouse-
your
the schoolhouse
demand's
gets
going to go
larger.
up.
Right.
Other things get larger. But
EVs and all that. Yeah.
I wonder, in time to come, as we progress along, in years to come, if the stuff that they make for electricity will not get so it's less and less using
Sure.
electricity, which would help us immensely
Help everybody.
if
You
that,
bet.
if that was
Help
possible.
People adding solar also. I mean, that's
Yes.
also a huge impact
There's a
on
lot
the
of
grid,
solar.
our own grid. So yeah, I mean, but that's kind of the perspective you want to think about it from. I think is your users are going to have the biggest impact on them.
I don't aim to
and then
sound like I'm being negative here.
No, Ray,
No, I think no.
So-
Pragmatic's fine.
Yeah. So what are you guys thinking? Just between those two, I mean, rip the Band-Aid off, or
Yeah,
or
I don't like that approach at all. I don't think it's fair to the citizens. It's not their fault. We weren't more proactive and didn't stay on top of this. I mean, the last few years especially, I think I'm really hurt with the price of everything going up substantially. And I'd like to do it as gradual as possible, minimal impact.
So what are you thinking as far as this year and then
good question. So
next year and then next year?
yeah. So Jerry, I think ripping the Band-Aid off, make sure you stay within reserve policy, which is always a goal. It's a shock initially. People don't have time to budget for it. I think that was the sentiment Corey was sharing. So what this shows is the proposed 10% now, 5 and 2. If you look at the top line,
I understand.
that keeps us at our minimum reserve policy. So what I think the committee was thinking is, let's announce we need to catch up. We need to get to this so that people can plan for it and we can minimize it this year, as much as we can and stay within reserve policy, and then just do what we need to do next year so people have time to react and plan, budget. But I do think we need to make sure they understand it's going on.
I understand that the end product is the same.
That's a great way to put it. It's how do you want to get there?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's all gonna be the same.
Yeah.
You either do it one time.
Yep.
And get by it, or you add it up and go
Yeah.
like Susan says. Of course, I've already made my opinion,
Yeah.
that I'm for the one-time shot to get it
No,
over
that's
with.
fine.
But, that doesn't mean that I can't.
No, it's a valid opinion.
I think the one thing to be cognizant of, though, as we're making these decisions is, I don't think it's something that we want to kick to September and say, because like I said, the kilowatt hour usage is double right now. And so you don't want to be passing that double cost down the road and kicking the can and then having that impact be greater down the road. I think we're going to catch a little bit of it now. My suggestion was, and just kind of a out of thin air, just kind of throw something out there, $0.015 increase per kilowatt hour through July, August, maybe into September, and then let it level out and then increase it. And that way you're still in that, $20 to maybe $30 monthly impact
Are you
range.
talking about increasing it twice a year?
Yeah,
So
through one ordinance.
yeah. So I think what you're proposing would be, we'd still net out to the same 10% for this year,
Correct.
but you would lower it on a percentage basis for the heavy use months, and you would raise it for so if you think about it, the customer's bill is going to be more of a flat line instead of this spike and then drop back down.
Right.
So what he's proposing is two different rates starting July 1 and then maybe October 1 to get us that 10%. But without seeing a bigger spike, it would lower the spike and also lower the drop. So effectively kind of even it out. It makes sense.
At what point in time with this formula do we start seeing money accumulate in the fund?
Immediately.
So we've got money in the fund. If you remember, if we do this 10%, we still have, we're at the top end of our policy. We're at 25%, 1.4 million.
Go to that next slide though, Scott.
The next one?
Jerry, even if we don't do anything, we're still within policy.
Right,
Even if we did nothing
right.
For 1 year.
Well, to the end of this year.
to the end of this year.
Right.
We're
And-
talking,
Wow.
you're talking 5 years. 3
Well,
years here,
so
Mike.
the other scenario is we don't do any increase this year. We still stay within our reserve barely, but look what we need to do next year just to stay at the minimum reserve again. We got to go to 24% because we lost this 6 months of
Yeah.
revenue.
Whatever little you can do immediately will save you bigger impacts.
So
down
we're
the road.
losing every month this year. If we don't do anything, we continue to lose. It draws down that reserve. It's no longer available. So now you got to make it up in that rate by going up 24% next year
And you don't want to do that.
and 8.5% the following year.
That's too much.
Right.
We don't
Right.
do that.
No, we gotta catch it now.
We don't
Yeah.
do that.
And
So
I like
this-
your approach, Corey.
Yeah.
Because
It's
that was
something.
my initial.
It's a starting point.
Yeah.
Right. And my initial thought
It's
was, man,
complex.
this is a
It's
terrible
complex,
time of
right?
year.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. This double the
so,
usage.
So yeah, to break that
Well, it
out.
essentially splits this slide into the next slide, is what it does.
I understand what you're
No.
saying, Susan, about
No.
not wanting to slap
So,
everybody.
You're
what-
giving up 5%
Yeah.
No,
in August and
And
September.
I understand.
No. So what
Yeah, think about it
what I
from
believe
total
he's
kilowatt hour
usage.
what I believe he's proposing is whatever dollar value that 10% would generate, we're going to split the percentage up to where high usage is going to be a lower rate to get half the dollar value. The next 3 months would be higher rate, lower usage to get half the dollar value. So the dollar value at the end of the year is going to be the same. We're going to end up at the same spot.
You're talking about a higher percentage increase.
So we're talking
Have to.
so before the first 3 months is going to be below 10%.
Correct.
So it'd be 5%.
Right.
But October,
And the next 3
November,
months may
December.
have to be 7.5 to make up
Yeah.
for it.
You gotta think about it from the kilowatt hours perspective. So
we can
from
manage.
here to December 31, you have a certain amount of projected kilowatt hours that are going to be used throughout the whole town. About from thinking about a residential standpoint, 1,800 households. So you got to think. So if you're double right now, let's say you just did 3% increase right now. So every resident had an average, let's just say $60 increase July, right? So then come September, October, November, it wouldn't be a $60, it'd be 40 in September, 30 in October. It'd drop off because your usage is dropping. Whereas if you could get a little bit of it, you can get half of it right now, then you wouldn't have that dramatic blip in July and August, but you would also be higher in the lower months, but
Right.
a lot more digestible to have a $20 increase a month than 3 months of 60.
Yeah.
Right out the gate.
Well, the thing you do is you get 05 for the rest of the year and increase your 2025 number to whatever it needed to be
Right.
to make up for what you lost.
All I was saying is, if you do that, it's gonna be a higher percentage of increase
Yes.
this year. It's got to be. It's
It's
gotta
got to
be. It can't stay at 10% and stay at the same revenue.
So
and lose
3
July
months
and
of it
August.
would be higher,
Correct. October, November, December is gonna be,
higher than
Correct.
10%.
Right.
And then
Yes.
you're gonna
But
have
the
to do it
net
again.
out of the kilowatt hours comes out the same dollar value.
It's 5% increase.
Yeah, you're right. We're saying the same thing. You're right.
so, but what,
We're trying to hit that mark as close as possible.
And like I said, we have reserve. You could let that go into 2025 and make 25. We haven't seen the MCI numbers, but make 25 a little higher than 5%. So some of that could spill over again to how long do you want to, and how much of a ramp do you want to let everybody have in getting that back, getting it to where it needs to be. That makes sense? I mean,
no, it
whatever
makes,
we don't get in
makes-
24 has to go into 25 and 26.
yeah, it makes complete sense. I'm just saying that so let's hypothetically, let's say the numbers say, okay, we're gonna increase it 5% in July for the July bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in October, we're gonna need to increase another,
50, maybe 15%.
correct. Now we're already at 20%, we're over the 17% we needed.
Right. So it's not yeah.
So then.
So
kind
you're
of
right. It's additive. It's not a one time. Well, you make it a one time, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
There is a percentage
You're gonna
increase
make
when
it
you're
20
increasing by
make
7.5.
20% when it could be 17 to start with.
There's a number we can get to. It's
I know we can get there, but I'm just saying, that's the hypothetical, that's where
Yeah.
because you're not gonna decrease that
Well-
percentage later on.
Is that what you're doing?
What we want to make sure is, if we're trying, is we end the year at a net 10% increase. We're at that 10% mark. It might be for only the last 3 months of the year, but we're there. So maybe we go 5% for the first 3 months, 10 for the next 3 months. Some of that's got to spill over if we didn't make up the revenue into 25. But that makes it easy. You end up 10. Ooh, it's just those numbers are gonna change every time you decide to do one thing.
But why wouldn't you do 5 now and then 5 then, and then you end up at the 10%? And then you're adding on another 5 in 25.
You just have a bigger gap.
You eat into a little bit more of your reserve, but you
do.
still get to
And
the same
that's perfectly
percentage.
fine. That's probably easier to understand. It'd be 5 and 5, and then
That's the object is not to eat into that
we
reserve.
Well, I mean,
You're right. Great point. But again, if you want to slow this ramp out, it's there to be used to do these types of things. We would get it back by increasing the rate next year by maybe it has to go to 6% or 5.5% to get that reserve, to build that reserve back
You bring
up.
it back?
Yeah. So we're always,
Half at one time, 1% on the end?
well, it depends on what the numbers come out to. But you're right. We're always going to we have to set the rates to cover our expenses and make sure we stay within reserve policy. That's what our rates need to be.
and again, I'm gonna bring up, in 26, this might look a lot different depending on our growth for the next
Right.
12 to 18 months.
It's definitely gonna look different if you wait till 26 to do it.
I'm not saying wait till 26, but 26 I think is gonna look different than what this
Oh, the
shows
estimate,
right
yeah.
now, because we're gonna have more revenues in
Yeah.
that.
For sure.
Maybe, you hope.
Yeah.
Well, we already know that, people are already
Yeah.
pulling building permits, so we already know. it's gonna be
And really what that does for it is spreads out the cost of our debt and our operations among more people,
correct.
right? It doesn't affect the power because you're going to buy the power to support that many people. But the more households you have, the more you spread that expense across, because our expense operations doesn't really scale based on households. I mean, at some point it does in generation. You have to buy generators. We have to watch that. We just bought some, we're bringing them online. That affects it. But yeah, that's why more households are better from a cost perspective for everybody.
The more households you got, the more cost you got.
No.
For power, but we're passing that along. We don't necessarily have a lot of operational incremental costs. If you add 10 houses, well, I don't know that Jeff's needs to hire somebody to support 10 more houses. But it's the operations is supportive. I don't know what the limit is.
Speaking of the operator, what's his opinion?
That's good.
That's getting me sitting right there.
To me, it doesn't really matter as long as we get to where we need to be, and I think that's what these guys are proposing is getting there one way or the other. How you get there is up to you guys, so. But the important part is
You're
getting
saying
there,
it's just the road or the alley would take you to get there, huh?
pretty much.
I like the idea of doing 5 now and 5
Yeah.
in the fall
We can,
to see how that impacts it. That's-
I like the
So,
idea. I
so
like
is
the
this gonna
idea
be
of going 17.
reevaluated every year?
Every
Yes.
year, every year.
so great point, Julie. So I would propose we put it in an ordinance that it is evaluated every year, right? Along with the MCI will be
Yeah.
added every year, and the rate will be evaluated, before the end of November. Pick something. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen after we're all gone, but that's all we can do is try to set a process in place that helps avoid surprises.
This,
Mhm.
what we're in right now? So at the end of, can you put that other one up again? At the end of 26, our rates are gonna be 17% higher?
Yeah.
Potentially.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
It's gonna be 17% higher at the end of 3 years or 17% off the top, that's my.
Potentially.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
It depends on, by the way,
It's gonna be the
whatever
same.
we set for budget for 26. I mean, that's gonna drive, that 2% might be low.
Right, and that MCI might be low.
That's just based, I mean, you can see what he did with numbers, it kind of just pushed them out to the right, kept a lot of them flat, so,
If you did the 17 off the top, would it make it a possibility that your MCI would be cheaper at the end?
No.
No?
No, that's a national index.
Yeah.
So that's what a lot of municipalities use.
Or are you
Yes,
talking about the
actually,
PCA?
I'm sorry?
Are you talking about the PCA?
Yes, yes.
Oh, PC.
No, because that's just based off the cost of what it's costing us at
So-
that time.
real quick what the PCA is, just so everybody understands it, it took me a while, right, Jeff?
If you see the electric funds overtime, that's because of Scott.
Alarms are going off out there, and I'm like, wait a second.
The 3-month average is
He's been
confusing.
very helpful. You want to get into that? I can certainly.
No, it's-
But so the thing.
I understand it now. I'm saying it's
Think
it's
of
tough
it
sell.
this way. So we projected, where's the number on expenses? Down here, 2024, 2.475 million, based on 37 million kilowatt hours that we sold last year. So we expect, based on our contracts, that's what it's going to cost us to acquire that. So if you do the math on that, it breaks down to a kilowatt, cents per kilowatt hour. So what that means is, okay, and they change what they charge us every month based on what it costs them to deliver it to us. So if they happen to deliver it to us for 1/12 of that math we just did, PCA is 0. Because it's what we thought it would be, it's what we budgeted, it's not higher, it's not lower, so the power cost adjustment's 0. Well, if it comes in and they charge us more than that average, that 1 month average, then it's like, wait a second, if we don't charge more, we now lost money, right? Because we didn't pass that cost on. The rate's set, and it cost us more than we built into that rate. So stop me if I've lost you, but what that means is, well, we've got to go charge that extra cost to the customer to keep us whole. So if we calculate it's going to cost us 12 cents a kilowatt hour, and they billed us for 13 cents a kilowatt hour, that PCA is going to be 1 cent a kilowatt hour times however many kilowatt hours you use, and that's your FA line we're going to change that to PCA line on your bill. So it really does change the rate based on our power cost. And if it's below that, guess what? You'll get a negative. It will be below 12 cents. If it's 11 cents, you'll get a credit for 1 cent a kilowatt hour. So at the end of the year, whatever we were charged in power is exactly what we charge the citizens on their bills. And that's what that PCA does. It just makes sure that we don't have to worry about that. It's going to be what it is. We just have to worry about the operations. Are our costs staying in line with what we thought they would be, and is our rate covering it? Does that make sense? PCA, and then what we're doing is 3-month average. We're just doing the trailing 3 months of what the trailing 3 months cost should have been based on our budget versus what it actually was, and then that average is what we charge you. So it's just going to be a 3-month rolling
It
average.
eliminates the peaks.
Yeah, so if you get a real big month, it's kind of just averages out the past 3 months, so it just smooths out those big peaks.
So we're going with 10% the first year, 5.5, right?
We aren't deciding anything tonight.
Hypothetically, I'm throwing.
Yeah, so
We're going 5.5, right?
We could.
Next year, we go 5 and we lose money, correct?
No.
Well,
Well, we do.
It depends.
he is correct. He is absolutely correct because
But we
And then-
stay within
and-
budget.
and then-
you're right. So it's this number he's looking
You're
at.
right, but
So
you're gonna lose money.
our
Next year we'll have
our
to
have to go
reserve.
into
So
reserves.
we're eating into the reserves, and we
You're right.
lose 400,000. But we're still within our policy.
So the 2% at the end of the last year is to pick up, to cover up what you've lost the first
Now
2
it
years.
keeps
is that
us right there.
Keeps us right at
It
reserve.
keeps us right at the minimum reserve. Now, what we want, if we decide that we want to,
Now, wait a minute.
yeah, go ahead.
That 10%
Uh-huh.
is the difference between MCI and the remaining amount, correct?
I think it's
You
everything.
got 10%, you got 10% the first year, the second year you lose 400,000.
Right.
The third year, you pick up 200,000 and you get back where you was at before, or where you should be.
Right.
Were you behind the year before? When you reserve, or whatever you call it?
No, our reserve's been high. We've been eating into it, bringing it down. Now it's kind of down to our minimum reserve policy. We're trying to keep it there.
We're 17% short right now, so by year 3, we'll be at 17%, and then MCI, which will take into effect,
I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand that.
yeah. So we'll be caught up by year
That's
3.
why it's 17%.
We'll be caught up by year 3.
Scott, why does that have the ending balance of 26 at 661? That wouldn't meet your
Well, so
minimum, would
here,
it?
it's confusing. Net surplus cash is a negative number, so it's actually a positive. Well, I think it's these two numbers combined. I think if I do the math.
So you're going 24, 25, and
So-
26.
Is that now? It isn't the math. So that's a good question. I don't know what he's got here.
That doesn't look right.
It doesn't look right to me.
Because this should be the reserve, because I clarified that today with them, is this line.
Yeah, 'cause he's-
But you can also see that this doesn't match that, so.
$661,000 is your reserve, right?
What's that?
$661,000 is your reserve, right?
I think that top number is what the 15% would be of what your budget would be.
correct.
Of the expense, but.
Yeah,
Yes,
so it
yes.
should be 923, but to me, it looks like
Yeah.
it'll be 661.
Yeah, but there's some math wrong there because he's
He
showing a
he left the assumption from year 1
Oh.
in year 3.
yeah.
It's not carrying. It's not compounding. You see, the same assumption for year 3 is the same as year 1.
Where you at?
This should be spreading out more evenly. See, that 661, it's not accounting for the compounding 10,
Oh.
5, and the 17.
You're right.
It assumes that we're still in this situation.
Yeah.
And we only added 5%
Right.
of where we're at today.
Right.
Not-
That assumes you only added
not
2% for year
15%.
3. It should
Yeah.
be 17 for year 3.
We've got a math
Oh,
issue
yeah.
here.
Yeah, it's just a math problem.
Yeah.
Good
Is-
catch.
Yeah, we're not
Yeah.
gonna,
So
we're not only saving
So now let's go to
5,000,
27.
4,000.
Which would actually mean, those numbers might be lower percentage-wise.
Could be. If you go to 20, you go to
You
year
you feel with
27,
that? Is that a live
No,
Excel
it's
sheet?
PDF.
you go to year 27, you're gonna have that, we're going to have that written.
Actually, year 27, we drop off a ton of debt.
Right.
In 27, but there will be written rules in the year of 27 that says it will be looked at again, is that correct?
Every year.
Every year.
Every year thereafter.
I think,
That's what we're recommending.
I think by the end of November,
How about these
the
3 years?
council ought
that we're
to
dealing with?
decide
We're
what the
still
rate
gonna
needs
be
to
looking
be.
at them every
You're
year.
gonna- Next year, no, you.
Starting
year after
25.
year
By
after.
ordinance, so we'd have to redo the ordinance every year.
An ordinance to
Every
renew the ordinance, yeah.
No,
So actually, what we're looking at is can change.
putting it in the
You
ordinance.
forced it.
is-
26.
Correct. Yeah, this is just projection. This could change, definitely depending on
It's
our
estimates,
growth and
assumptions, yeah.
all that stuff.
But I think the process is there to make it where we can adjust real time, in time.
Well, I kind of agree with Jim, and I think I mentioned it too. The objective is 17% as we look at it here now,
Right.
approximately.
Yeah.
And that could change next year and the year after.
Correct.
You did the math right on this one.
So it does make-
was-
Yeah, there it is.
There was nothing.
Yeah, there
in
you go.
10.
Yeah.
All that matters really is the end of next year, essentially, is what matters right now.
because we're in budget process, so
Mhm.
timelines, I don't
So
know.
really, 26 is when you'll reevaluate.
Now we reevaluated all 3 years.
26 budget.
We'll still look at 25s again,
Right,
but yeah,
yeah.
more than likely, you probably won't make much changes from this until 26. Because there won't be enough data.
But one of the things we will be able to do, once we finalize the 25 budget, we'll know what the electric utility expenses are planned to be. We'll know what our rate's gonna need to be. I mean, we will know after August what the rate needs to be and see if it lines up with what we think it is.
And that's 33% you got there. That's 33.5%.
Well, that's only 2 years worth, right? So rather than 2.5 years, we're doing nothing. This is another
This is a scenario if we don't
you
do
put
anything
together.
this year.
We do nothing this year, 24,
Uh-huh.
next year. No,
No,
no what?
I don't wanna do that next
Okay.
year.
Well, we're trying to give you options.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot.
And it's anywhere in between. I mean, it's literally anywhere in between that. We can do it. I mean, if you guys are good with it, we'll go back in the budget finance and map out what we talked about, the 5 and 5 for 3 months, 5 the next 3 months. See what that does and fix the math on this, see what that does.
Yeah.
And we'll just kind of use this as our template and see if it's going to work.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
Can we do that before?
So we'll have to
We
go
talk
through
about
this
it at
discussion all
council.
over again, huh?
We'll be doing
So
it
we
at
have
council.
we have a meeting on the 2nd,
But,
is that right?
oh, well,
So we have a meeting on the 2nd, so maybe this,
So we got a meeting.
we need a budget meeting before then.
True.
Well, no, you just gotta pass it by the second.
Yeah, so actually, if we only want to do one reading, we could do it on the
16th.
The 16th.
Well, we've technically read it in once. That's when this kicked off. Remember when we brought the PCA and all that stuff, and we kicked it back to committee?
And we'll bring the new PCA formula ordinance change. It's got its own ordinance, so just a new formula that will be done at the same time. So
I mean, if we have a budget meeting before the July
we can
2nd
do that.
meeting,
We can try.
Yeah, if we have a budget meeting before the July 2nd meeting, then the July 2nd meeting will be your first reading, because we're talking about what we
Yeah.
brought out of budget.
So we'll commit to trying to do that. I don't know everybody's availability, but we can do a lot of this by email with Ben. He can do his thing and send it.
That'd be this
Will
Friday.
this be in
It'll be
the
this Friday.
council packet then?
No.
We will, yes,
Okay.
it will be. I mean, I'll have Amber send it out like tomorrow.
Oh, that'd be great.
that'd be.
So you can
even
start
better.
looking at
Yeah.
it. If you have questions, call me, call one of these guys,
Okay.
Jeff, Glenn, anybody. But yeah, we'll get this. I'll have her send this out to you tomorrow.
Can you send it to me as well so I can put it on the website?
Yes. We probably want to fix the math.
I want to fix the math, yeah.
Yes, that would be
Yeah, the
ideal.
Are you about done?
Yeah.
Glenn, I wanna hear your opinion.
I think we're in the right direction rather than do it all at once. I don't think that's going to be what we wanted to do. So we will do it gradually. And,
See if we're sure about that.
yeah, well, we started in the right. We haven't raised the rate since 2009, so you can't do that forever. PCA needs to be adjusted. After that, it's going to be a math problem.
We didn't raise the rates, but we raised the reserve, didn't we, for electric in that window? Because if you've been using the reserve to make up for the rates, then you've been raising the rates.
Well, right, we spent it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the reserve is higher than it needed to be for quite a while.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Is there anything in
the
there that
reserve,
you could see that needs to be
policy.
changed, like meter
I'm sorry,
costs or?
the
meter
the
fees?
meter
No,
fee.
I wouldn't. That's not going to solve it.
Have we raised the meter fee in the
Yeah.
last 15 years?
It's
for
been
the
12
electric?
forever.
I don't think so.
I thought the last council.
Probably a little bit, but that's not gonna, I mean, you're dealing with the wholesale price. of
Mm-hmm.
Is it
power.
all water? Am I thinking just water?
Yeah, I think you're thinking
Water
about
and
water.
sewer.
We went down that water, yeah.
Yep.
Yes, we had a really healthy reserve for a long time.
Yep. They essentially overcharged for.
That's
Not
Right.
really though.
Well,
Yeah.
Not really, because we've used that reserve to make up for what we haven't been charging directly month to month on the bill.
But at the beginning, they had to overcharge just to get enough
Yeah.
reserve to carry
Right.
I
us
think
for
it,
the
yeah,
last.
and I talked to you. I think it was a cyclical a little bit because
Yeah.
power didn't. There was some dips,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think we followed the rate. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff. We didn't follow it down when the power went down. We just put it in the reserve,
Yeah.
and now that it's only going one way, we've been eating that reserve down to we're out.
Right.
Right, we're gonna buy generators with it actually last year, so we had to actually change that so we could use that as a reserve. So, I mean, you heard KMA, it happened pretty quickly. I mean, we still had time to catch it. We missed it. But we're within policy. The fund will stay, meet what we do for county wise. It will be a zero-sum game budget, and we'll fix the cash flow problem.
Tentatively, this is going to work fine. Unless we have to change in the next 2 years. But what you do this year doesn't make any difference because you got 2 more years to pick it up.
So the goal is as we all understand this, I mean, for me personally, the more we dig into it, it's like, okay, now I understand. Is if we all understand it, we can have these conversations and talk about it. You kind of know, well, if we do this, it's going to impact that. I get it. I still want to do it. So it'll be, I think, a much more educated council decision going forward.
Jeff, when we bought, I don't mean to get in the weeds, but I don't get everyone's ears so often. So when we bought the 2 new generators, do we know how much that additional capacity has saved this fund annually?
Well, it has a potential, they're estimating $6 capacity charges. So that would be 4,500 times $6 per month is what the value of
But they got to come
those
online
two
first,
are-
right?
No,
No, they can sit idle and still have capacity.
They have to be,
they have to be proven once a year that they'll do what that we say.
but we have to have them powered up. I mean,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can't buy them
yeah.
and stick them in the shed. Or,
No.
Yeah,
We have to
they have to
prove
be
it and then-
online.
Yes.
I got my capacity generators out in the shed. You want
Is
to
that
see?
32,000.
So are they online yet?
I'm hoping by September.
So they're not online. They got to bring them online before.
So is that forecasted in there?
What'd you get, 20?
Because 32,000 times 12 is
But that's a
384,000.
cost avoidance. I don't know. That's a savings.
No, because if we didn't have that capacity, we have to go out and buy it off the market.
Right. That's avoiding costs.
So if we hadn't bought those, it would be a much worse math problem.
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Much worse.
There's a difference between saving yourself money and avoiding more cost.
Yeah.
Which is what that would be. What was the number?
384,000.
300.
84,000.
That pays for those generators in 3 or 4 years,
Yeah.
assuming it stays at 6. Right?
Yes.
As it goes up, it gets shorter payback window. So, all right. Anything else?
This is good.
Good.
Yeah,
Very
thank you
beneficial
for your
for
work
Yeah.
on
Yeah,
this,
you've done
guys.
good.
That's
You got a lot of work in there.
It's been a long time.
Yeah,
but then as the
Much
understanding
needed.
grows, we'll all be better
right.
at it. So,
I think the percentage is gonna change, I think. when
It
it's
will.
So all said and done, it'll be more.
we'll all understand exactly why, and we'll all figure out what we think it needs to be. And
I think it'll be more incentive.
The softest landing we can afford.
Huh?
yes,
Yes.
yeah. To your point, we got to get to where it needs to be, but we're going to try to make it as palatable over a longer period of time as possible.
I think growth's going to affect this more than you.
I'm sorry.
Hopefully.
Growth's
Yeah.
going to affect this.
That's one of those numbers in the back of your mind that you're like,
Yes, I'm so hopeful.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, because
It's
for every
simple math problem.
kilowatt hour they buy, if you remember that
Not
first,
yet,
if you remember
It's
this,
not moving.
and the reason he says that, if you remember this one here, so for every kilowatt hour, this blue one's going to be whatever. We don't fund anything with that blue other than power the cost. But for every kilowatt dollar incremental we use by adding the rooftops, they pay for that, and that 8 cents goes down.
correct. Go to your next slide. This number doesn't go up. No, the one, I'm sorry, the prior one. The 2 bar graphs. Right there. This number doesn't go up. The blue.
Right.
Right. By adding more rooftops, your admin fees don't change.
Or right. Yeah.
Or
And that
your-
is the section that we identified
Or
as
a generation until we have to buy new generators, or a distribution unless we got to build new.
Right.
Or your debt.
And
But that's where the inflation we didn't catch. The admin.
that's the
idea
whole
is-
operation. It's all
the
three
idea
of
is
them.
Right.
situation is to deal with.
Yeah, it's 3 bars there. It's 1 there. It's the orange there. All those 3 are that 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's not related. And by the way, if we didn't sell anything, that orange bar stays at about 8 cents. Because that's what it costs us to operate, whether you're sending any power to anybody or not. So if it were 0, that 8 cents goes to 17 cents.
But you're.
If it doubles, that 8 cents goes down to probably 6 cents. You know, if we double the number of households.
Right.
Or yeah, it's the number of households. Double the revenue, not the number of households.
Right.
So the benefit of growing is that orange, that's half our rate is that we spread it out over more people. That's a lower number for everybody.
We hope.
No, it is. That's
a fact.
That's the way it works.
That's a fact.
It doesn't work that way if you have to increase another percent or two.
Have we,
And
we,
it costs.
huh?
If for some reason or other
So
things change and we have to add another 2%,
So Jerry, whatever the cost is, so look at it this way: if our cost is $100
right,
and we have these 5 people, we have to spread it over. We have to pay each $20.
that's right.
If it's $100 and we add 5 more people, our
$10.
share, right? If it's $110 and it's only 5 people, everybody's cost goes up. But if it's $110 and it go, 10 people,
Now we're down to 10.
we're down. Yeah, so it's always the same. If you spread it out, whatever the cost is, it's going to be spread out amongst a group. And we got to get to that. So you want as many people paying that as you can, whatever that cost is, and it's going to go up.
Yeah, it's going up.
So it's better if it's going up to get more, right? So it doesn't go up as fast because you're spreading out that cost over that growth or that increase over more people.
Sure. Your reserve would go up a little bit because your exposure's up a little bit, theoretically.
Population,
But then, yes, you have so many levers there.
population increase lowers percentage-wise.
Correct. Of the cost of operating anything, because the operating cost is fairly flat. It's not really related to number of households. Your power is, your operations are. And same for debt. The more you spread out that debt over more rooftops, guess what? That debt number percentage-wise goes down for everybody. All right.
Anybody else have anything?
Good discussion, folks.
All right.
Yeah.
We're adjourned.
I'm sorry I talk so much.
No, you asked a good question. I mean,